If games of Human Twister are your thing, then the Zack Sabre Jr. vs. Hechicero matches will be exactly what you were looking for. Few wrestling matches in the 21st century contain a more impressive array of shapes and entanglements. Sabre vs. Hechicero, the match that's always a twist, could be their tagline. Twist and shout, stretch and bend. This is definitely the matchup that will tie you up in knots, as these two flexible foes put their spin on submission wrestling. This was a whole lot of fun, but I wasn't as tangled up as I wanted to be, as it was too loose to be twisted enough, and trying to take this seriously as an athletic competition put more of a stretch on my mind than their clever submissions may have put on each other's bodies. I was happy they got to stretch the limits of their grappling game until they could feel the burn, but I personally couldn't get twisted up enough to really care who came out on top. I don't mind that the majority of their submissions had no real-life application, but the opponent needs to put up some kind of resistance to their appendages being twisted, turned, and scissored. It's cool seeing a match where they roll each other into some sort of knot or ball, but I'd prefer if it wasn't done in a manner where they could have been working with a doll, except a live opponent made things that much easier by clearly assisting. Their CMLL match from June 22nd, 2024 at Arena Coliseo isn't that similar to what Zack is doing elsewhere right now. While I'm in the minority for preferring Zack's April 12, 2024 New Japan TV title match against Matt Riddle, a more technically precise opponent he has better chemistry with, in a match that was much easier to take seriously given they leaned into Riddle's UFC background. At least if this match with Hechicero was going to be unbelievable, Zack truly leaned into that. They didn't reverse and counter each other nearly as well as Zack and Riddle, but no one can accuse Zack and Hechicero of going halfway. They did every sort of twist and scissor they could think of. One thing that's really in their favor is that we might not see another match like this all year, outside of perhaps their rematch that's set for August 24th on Rev Pro's 12th anniversary show, assuming neither jump to WWE and bail on all their pre-existing dates like Stephanie Vacour. Although there are few current practitioners of the classic British technical style, one of the aspects that makes it more versatile than most people realize is that quality practitioners should be dynamic enough to modify it in a more realistic bend to do a quasi-shoot style match, or a less realistic bend to do a lucha-style match, without betraying the core tenets of the style. This was definitely the latter, and to Zack's credit, it didn't feel like a clash of styles in any way. While I could watch most Zack Sabre Jr. day and night, I'm glad he only does this variation on rare occasions. I want his grappling to be more believable, grittier like the Bryan Danielson matches, so there's drama in the struggle, and or faster and more explosive, so it's a more entertaining exhibition. This style just felt too much like a posing demonstration. There wasn't enough resistance to what the opponent was doing to take it seriously as fighters struggling for victory, which made all the typically overdone aspects of lucha that grasp and cloy for drama, but only succeed in the opposite, that much more distracting and annoying. I don't think these Zack vs. Hechicero matches are awesome wrestling matches, but they are definitely notable for their uniqueness. Similar to the Rey Fenix vs. Will Ospreay video I did recently, where I loved the athletic sequences they were able to develop by having an opponent who was there matched athletically, Zack and Hechicero are developing their own technical grappling style together that they could only do with a small number of other opponents. They are certainly doing something interesting by pushing the boundaries of a brand of wrestling most others ignore, even if at the expense of believability and a lot of other things. Given their matches consist of tying and tangling each other up into a submission or a flash pin, everything was theoretically sort of a threat to finish. They would continue their sequences by twisting and turning some more to counter into a submission or a flash pin until someone grabbed the ropes or kicked out, then annoyingly just stare at each other until they got around to restarting. The 3-fall format of their CMLL match worked better than the 1-fall format of their PWG match because it was more believable that someone would briefly be caught in an awkward position or simply off guard without necessarily being totally trapped. One of the big problems with these matches is that the lack of resistance never allowed me to believe they were really being trapped. I mean, the matches were way more towards exhibitions of appendage holding than submission grappling, and it just looked like they could stop all this with even the least bit of effort. Hechicero being a bit sloppy, which made Zack's lack of resistance that much more obvious, wasn't helping things either. There were several moments where you might say, nice, or cool, but none where you'd say, oh my god, he's done for. The finishes were all kind of just there. None of them really felt earned, and even Hechicero cheating by flash pinning Zack with his foot in the ropes in the deciding fall of their CMLL match felt almost incidental. I suppose partly because Mexican nationalism had the fans going crazy for Hechicero, even though he's otherwise a rudo. The CMLL crowd, who regularly cheered, "This is Lucha," was much better, partly because they had someone to root for, even if it was someone they normally root against. The PWG crowd on October 19, 2018 at the Globe Theater in Los Angeles was mostly just polite. Hechicero made his PWG debut in this match, and US indie appearances were very low priority for the British Sabre, behind his work in New Japan, Rev Pro, and other European indies. I definitely liked the CMLL match more because they basically stuck to technical wrestling and tried to carve out their own match. The PWG match started off as a fully technical match and felt less like an exhibition since it was an international style match, rather than a technical match within the light and floppy lucha limb holding style. Because the PWG style is more universal, they felt more compelled to evolve it through more conventional means, building up to the first strike exchange, as well as doing a bit more running and jumping. The striking was less unconvincing in this match, and against any other opponent, this layout would probably have been a good thing. After all, whoever else they were wrestling would likely have been more of a high flyer, striker, or power wrestler who was trying to avoid their submission wrestling so they could get their own stuff in. I appreciate the CMLL match more because they pretty much just did the style they do best. There were lots of fun counters, reversals, and transitions into unique and original submissions. In both cases, the 18 minutes 29 seconds of their PWG match and the 19 minutes 9 seconds of the CMLL match flew by quickly, with neither wrestler seeming to gain any real advantage, and someone eventually just randomly winning with a flash pin. The CMLL match was performed more impressively. While there still wasn't any real resistance to any of the holds, they were doing them with more speed and explosion to help cover that up. Both matches look better in the pictures because Zack, at least, does a great job making faces that give the illusion there's some real struggle going on, even though the rest of their movements suggest otherwise. The slower, more deliberate style of technical wrestling Hechicero employs doesn't really accentuate what Zack does best, but he's certainly a sincere opponent who tries hard to make his opponent look as good as he can. While Hechicero isn't necessarily an ideal opponent for Sabre, because Sabre slows things down and lightens things up for him, he's a rare opponent Sabre can do whatever he wants with. Simply putting Sabre in with an athlete such as Will Ospreay, who has enough knowledge of how to go with and escape the submissions, should result in a more explosive and dynamic match, even if Zack only gets to do half of his technical match, because the opponent is just going to answer him on the mat as much as they absolutely have to, in order to get things into their own realm. That being said, variety is obviously good as long as both wrestlers are serious about putting each other over. These Sabre vs. Hechicero matches are great examples of how real professionals take their opponents seriously and work with them to make them look good too, rather than what we predictably saw from their ill-fated AEW Forbidden Door matches on June 30th, which were doomed from the start by Tony Khan's poor matchmaking. People who want to see the sort of serious technical wrestling Sabre and Hechicero offer don't want to see that compromised by MJF and Pocket Pinball's comedy routines, and vice versa. Pocket Pinball standing around not hitting his opponent, and MJF clowning the whole time and making everything look completely over the top ridiculous will never help anyone but themselves. While I'm sure they are capable of better, the two Sabre vs. Hechicero matches we've seen so far aren't exactly answers for the people who don't like the modern trampoline or striking exhibitions, because they are still just an offensive variation on the same cooperative forms displays. These matches seem more notable than they are, because submission twister is so much rarer than wannabe tough man or flippy parkour. In the end, the primary advantage these Sabre vs. Hechicero matches have on their competition is there isn't much competition within their own genre. I give their PWG match 3.25 stars, and their CMLL match 3.5 stars.